Hello, I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Coming up on the program, former fashion mogul Peter Nygard is found guilty on 4 counts of sexual assault.
The guilty verdict is shared across all survivors. We did this for everyone, not only for ourselves.
Also, hundreds of Canadians fleeing the violence in Gaza have now crossed into Egypt. Meanwhile, in Canada, acts of hate are being condemned after a Jewish school in Montreal is hit by bullets again.
There's a conflict going on thousands of miles away. Don't bring it here.
And revenge of the record companies.
So I first saw it about 14 months ago. I call it the Taylor Swift clause.
How and why labels are trying to stop another Taylor's version. That's later. But first, a Toronto jury has found Peter Nygard guilty of 4 sexual assault charges. The 82-year-old former fashion mogul was acquitted on a 5th count and on another charge of forcible confinement. The charges are from incidents dating from the 1980s to the mid-2000s. Jamie Strachan now with the reaction to the verdict and what's next for Nygard.
Guilty. He's guilty.
For years, allegations of sexual misconduct have swirled around Peter Nygard. He has never been held accountable, until now. Therapist Shannon Moroney has worked with dozens of alleged Nygard victims, including 4 of the 5 women involved in this case. She shared reaction from one.
The verdict is not only for her, the guilty verdict, but it is shared across all survivors, all women and girls, and that we did this for everyone, not only for ourselves.
Many of the allegations in this case stretch back decades and were only recently reported to police. Many of the women told similar stories of meeting Nygard by chance at a party or on a plane before later agreeing to meet at his Toronto headquarters, where they were assaulted in his bedroom suite. They never went to police out of fear Nygard would ruin their careers. Crown attorney Neville Galwala painted Nygard as a predator who used his power and wealth to lure and abuse women.
This is a crime that typically happens in private and profoundly impacts human dignity. To stand up and recount those indignities in a public forum such as a courtroom is never easy and takes great courage. Everyone who came forward here is to be commended.
This case was closely watched by many, including Nygard's family. His son Kai raised suspicions about his father's behavior years ago and was in the courtroom when the verdict was read.
I loved my father. It hurts me to see all of these things. I knew a different man. I got a different version of him. And for me, that bond was real. But when you get the reveal that there is another person, there's another personality within there, there's something evil in there, there's something perverse, there's something sick.
Nygard, who testified in his own defense, didn't visibly react to the verdict. His lawyer, Brian Greenspan, wouldn't say if there would be an appeal.
I don't think that there was a basis to indicate that there was either luring or that he utilized his position of influence or power to engage in the conduct that he has now been convicted of.
No date for Nygard's sentencing has been set, but he faces a long legal road ahead regardless. He faces numerous sex-related charges in Manitoba, Quebec, and New York. Dozens of women are also part of a civil suit in the United States. He left court today hunched in the back of a police van, a black parka obscuring most of his face, a shadow of the man who for years was one of the most powerful men in global fashion. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
A Jewish school in Montreal has been hit by gunshots for the 2nd time in 3 days. Police say it happened at Yeshiva Gedola School, one of 2 schools targeted in overnight shootings just 3 days ago. As Sarah Levitt reports, the incident has left a community horrified and defiant.
As police lift the perimeter, curious students wearing kippahs and prayer shawls approach the door of their school. The glass of the door is shattered, a single hole pierced through. Montreal police say they received several calls around 5 a.m. this morning with reports of gunshots and a vehicle fleeing the scene. Officers arriving discovered the shattered glass and shell casings on the ground. Nobody was injured.
There's a conflict going on thousands of miles away. Don't bring it here.
Anger and worry brought Mayor Feg to Yeshiva Gedola of Montreal. He's a member of the Council of Hasidic Jews of Quebec.
It's fear. They're wanting to put fear into the community. It's very clear what they want to do. We're not going to stop what we're doing. We're going to go on. But you know, these things have to stop. This has no place here in Quebec, in Canada, Montreal. That's not who we are.
This is the second time in 4 days the school was targeted by gunfire. Another Jewish school close by was also shot at. It comes after a synagogue and community center was hit with a Molotov cocktail earlier in the week. Montreal Mayor Valérie Plante says the escalation of violence is unacceptable.
We're talking about an establishment where kids are going.
She says disagreements about what's happening in the Middle East are inevitable.
But we can do this, we can have those conversations with respect and not using fear and absolutely not having this kind of a violent act towards a community.
To some, though, what has happened is not just a violent act.
For the second time in less than 72 hours, our school, Yeshiva Gedola of Montreal, has been the target of a terrorist attack. I say again, a terrorist attack.
Lionel Perez speaks for the school.
They want to try and scare us into closing our schools, into not educating our children. They will fail.
Montreal police say its investigation into what happened continues, but for now, patrols in the area will be increased. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
The only passage out of Gaza reopened today. The Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt had been closed since Friday. More than 200 Canadians and people with connections to Canada have now made the crossing. Tom Perry is in Cairo with some of their stories.
On the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing, it's a scramble. Individuals and families wearing backpacks, hauling suitcases, trying to, at long last, escape the territory and the withering barrage of the Israeli military. As crowds arrive on the Egyptian side, they divide along national lines. Officials wearing bright vests, emblazoned with the flags of Germany, Denmark, and Canada, work to corral their citizens and ease them along on their final steps over the border.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Thank God the people from the embassy are here, says a Palestinian-Canadian man named Sammy. More than 200 people with connections to Canada made their way through the Rafah crossing today. They joined more than 100 other Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and their families who've already made it to Cairo. Many of those who have made it this far express relief at being out of Gaza, but also regret. 14-year-old Kamar Fayyad says before the war, she went to school, played by the sea, life was normal. Her 11-year-old brother Amir remembers playing with his friends. His favorite game was soccer. Life was beautiful, he says. Kamar and Amir's father, Mohammed, lives in Burnaby, BC. They haven't seen him in 10 years. Their uncle Mesara, Mohammed's brother, traveled with his niece and nephew through the Rafah crossing and now has a visa to accompany them to BC to be reunited with their dad.
I feel emotional upset, you know.
The only problem, Mesara's own family, his wife and 5 children, are still back in Gaza.
I'm really happy for the kids, so I will get them to their dad after 10 years. But just worried and feeling so bad about my family in Gaza. So my mind there and my heart there. I'm just here for the kids.
Mesara says he wants to return to Gaza and his family as soon as he can. He's just not sure when that will be. Many of those exiting Gaza speak of the agonizing choices that have been forced upon them. Separation from parents, siblings, even children. As more Canadians arrive from Gaza, there will be more such stories of people fleeing for their lives while leaving so much behind. Tom Perry, CBC News, Cairo.
In northern Gaza, doctors inside the Indonesia hospital work in near total darkness, treating a wounded man by the light from a smartphone. The situation at Gaza's hospitals is growing increasingly desperate, including at Al-Shifa, the largest medical facility. The European Union has joined a growing call for a pause in fighting, to open humanitarian corridors and allow aid to be brought in. Briar Stewart reports from Jerusalem.
As war rages through the embattled neighborhoods of North Gaza, on a bed in the Al-Shifa hospital lie some of the most vulnerable. 7 premature babies, born into a war that's already killed several thousand. Their tiny, wrinkled legs protrude out of oversized diapers. They're no longer in incubators because the hospital director told CBC News there's no fuel to run the generators.
We wait for any help from military, international Red Cross, from anyone. We need to evacuate this patient safely.
Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya says 3 babies have died in the past 2 days and says 37 others are in need of urgent medical treatment. The Israeli Defense Forces released a video which it says shows soldiers dropping off 300 liters of fuel outside the hospital. Fuel that the director told us is nowhere near enough and which they haven't received.
And it's dangerous. No one from the hospital can go bring this fuel from the street in this situation.
Israel suggested that Hamas was preventing the hospital from getting the fuel. Hamas denies that.
Well, we've called to evacuate all the patients from that hospital. And
during an interview with CNN, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Hamas was also stopping the civilians from leaving.
There's no reason why we just can't take the patients out of there instead of letting Hamas use it as a command center for terrorism.
All across northern Gaza, it's a desperate situation. Even with humanitarian corridors open, there's no easy way out. We walked for 4 hours until our legs hurt. We were carrying our children in our bags, said one mother. Hundreds of thousands have escaped to the south where it's supposed to be safer, but there is no sanctuary. Just outside of the city of Han Yunis, 13 Palestinians were reportedly killed in an Israeli airstrike. Well, Israel is facing growing international pressure to pause hostilities, including from the European Union. A group of U.S. congressmen were in Tel Aviv today to show America's still strong support for a country viciously attacked last month.
We're with you. Thank you.
Tonight, U.S. officials say they're in talks with Qatar, which has strong ties to Hamas officials. They say they're discussing the need to urgently evacuate the critically wounded and increase humanitarian aid, as well as to secure the release of the nearly 240 hostages still trapped in Gaza. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In eastern Ukraine, Russian attacks are intensifying near the city of Bakhmut. It was the scene of one of the war's deadliest battles when it fell to Russia in May. Ukraine then took back areas surrounding Bakhmut in its summer counteroffensive, but progress has slowed in recent weeks, and now Russia is trying to regain territory. Meanwhile, south of Bakhmut, the city of Avdiivka has also come under heavy fire. Ukrainian officials say Russia has launched 30 airstrikes at Avdiivka in the past 24 hours. The 2024 U.S. presidential race could be in for a bit of a shakeup. A high-profile senator appears to be testing the waters for a possible run at the White House. It's a move that comes as polls show voters aren't enthusiastic about either Joe Biden or Republican frontrunner Donald Trump. Katie Simpson has more from Washington.
On a sunny, crisp Sunday afternoon in front of the White House, one way to spoil the mood is to ask American voters their thoughts on the next presidential election.
It makes me sad, honestly. I think that it shows that our system is kind of broken.
There is a sense of frustration over how the 2024 vote is shaping up to be a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
I'm not wildly enthusiastic, but I think that's what we're going to get.
I think that they need to maybe get some, I hate to say younger minds in there, but more open minds in there.
Senator Joe Manchin is trying to tap into that mood. The Democrat is not seeking re-election, sparking speculation he's considering a third-party presidential run, even hinting at it in his announcement.
But what I will be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there is an interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle.
Manchin views himself as a centrist. He did not always vote along party lines, which has made him a favorite of the political group No Labels. It is considering launching a bipartisan presidential ticket and has gained support from other high-profile lawmakers, including the former Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan.
There are about 70% of the people in America that do not want Joe Biden or Donald Trump to be president, and I think that's why you're seeing all of these other potentials.
In addition to a possible no-labels ticket, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running as an independent. While the controversial candidate has a long history of spreading misinformation, a recent Quinnipiac University poll found him sitting with a remarkably high 22% support. There's also Jill Stein seeking the Green Party nomination, and progressive activist Cornel West is running too. All of these challengers are starting to worry some senior Democrats who fear vote splits will hurt Joe Biden, who in this moment is unpopular with deep reservations about his age.
You can't reverse it, no matter how effective Joe Biden is behind the scenes. In front of the camera, what he's projecting is causing people concerns, and that's worrisome.
David Axelrod is a former senior advisor to President Barack Obama. He has publicly mused about whether it's wise for Biden to run again. Biden has shrugged off the worry. With each day that passes, the window to change course shrinks ahead of what will be an intense election year. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The Edmonton Oilers have fired head coach Jay Woodcroft. The NHL team also says that assistant coach Dave Manson has been let go. Woodcroft will be replaced by Chris Knobloch, the head coach of the AHL's Hartford Wolfpack. The Oilers have won only 3 of 13 games this season. The team ranks near the bottom of the Western Conference standings, above only the San Jose Sharks. Iceland is on edge, bracing for a volcanic eruption in the country's southwest. Magma is making its way up to the surface after a series of tremors shook the island in recent weeks. Authorities warn it's not a matter of if, but when it'll boil over. Furkan Khan has more on the waiting game.
Residents of the town of Grindavik have been taking shelter in an evacuation center, anxiously following the news. Egert Solberg Johnson is one of them. He works for the town. These situations are very surreal, he says. The last thing I did at my office was read over the town's evacuation plan and give my approval. I never expected I would have to use it. His town, about 40 kilometers southwest of the capital Reykjavik, has been evacuated and a state of emergency has been declared, ahead of an expected eruption from the Fagradalsfjall volcano. The volcano has erupted 3 times since 2021, but in recent weeks it has managed to make a magma tunnel flowing underneath the town. And as every day passes, the tunnel has been rising closer to the surface. Yesterday alone, the tunnel rose from 1,500 meters to less than 800 meters. The wait for the eruption has been emotional for Johnson. He says he has been meeting people from his town, looking them in the eye, hugging them, even crying together. The wait has also been filled with thousands of tremors as the lava rips the ground beneath apart. More than 20,000 of them since late October. Vidhi Reinison is the head of Iceland's Civil Protection and Emergency Management Department.
The magma is now on a very shallow depth, so we're expecting an eruption within a couple of hours. Shortest, but at least within a couple of days. We have a fissure that's about 15 kilometers long, and anywhere on that fissure we can see that an eruption could happen.
Reinison says while the priority is to keep people safe, they are still worried about possible damage.
But very close to the town we have a critical infrastructure. We have a power plant, and we have the fresh water reservoir, and the hot water is also coming from this area. So there's a lot of critical infrastructure very close by.
Batal Thorbjörnsson says he doesn't even want to think about the worst-case scenario, about losing his house and everything that he owns. Furkan Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
In Nigeria, doctors say they are underpaid and overworked. Those working conditions are causing many to leave the country in search of better opportunities elsewhere, and that's creating a vacuum in an already fragile healthcare system. Freelance reporter Ajek Mangut reports.
This situation is bad.
Dr. Emmanuel Ichivi works in a public hospital in Nigeria. He says he's overworked.
Imagine being on a call for 72 hours in a row. Now that's because you're the sole doctor on ground. Now this would leave you exhausted physically, mentally.
According to the Nigerian Medical Association, there's now 1 doctor to every 10,000 patients. That ratio means doctors like Longji Dixon are under increasing pressure.
And this is under strenuous and very excruciating
excruciating conditions.
The Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors says more than 2,000 of its members have left Nigeria in the last 2 years because of poor pay and working conditions. Most of them are going to Canada, the United Kingdom and the United States. The association also says 6 in 10 doctors plan to leave Nigeria. Innocent Orji is the former president of the association. He says as more doctors leave, conditions worse for those who stay behind.
As long as you don't address the take-home pay of doctors and nurses, you are not going to address brain drain. The economy is biting harder. And, the salary structure we are using even now as we speak was approved in 2009.
In July, Nigeria's government announced a 25% salary increase for doctors. The Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors rejected that offer. It argues a 200% increase is needed to prevent doctors like Emmanuel Ichivi from leaving the country. Ajek Mangut for CBC News, Abuja, Nigeria.
The White Horse Dam is a dangerous obstacle for Chinook salmon, especially young salmon, making the long journey from the Yukon River to the Bering Sea. A recent government study, obtained via an Access to Information request, suggests the dam is killing the fish in large numbers. Julian Janak brings us the story.
Every year, thousands of young Chinook salmon swim down the Yukon River to the Bering Sea. For decades, the number of adult fish swimming back into Canadian waters, though, has plummeted, with the last 2 years having the lowest tallies on record. There could be many reasons for the decline: warmer water because of climate change, deadly parasites. But the study points to another possible culprit, the White Horse Dam. There are several ways the dam is having an outsized impact on salmon about a year old or younger. The leading cause of death, the study suggests, is the fish passing through the turbines. Michael Muller is with Yukon Energy, which paid for the study.
What our focus is on is trying to understand how those fish end up in the turbines.
The impacts from the dam are not just on salmon, but also on ways of life of several First Nations. When the dam was built in 1958, fishing camps that once lined the banks of the Yukon River were displaced forever. And First Nations have long abstained from harvesting the salmon to give the species a chance to recover. Kwalman Dun Chief Sean Smith says the study could lead to a reckoning with the legacy of colonization.
Recognition is what sort of things can we address as to historical impacts to our people and the impacts to the river itself, but to all the other things within our territory that survive off the salmon.
Mariah Benoit is frustrated. The Ha-Sha Deheni, or chief of the Carcross Tagish First Nation, says studies only beget more studies. What she wants is action.
So we don't get salmon at all here on this side of the dam. So we want to see salmon coming back to our traditional territory.
To estimate the salmon mortality rates, the researcher deployed sensors down the dam's turbines. The study also draws on research done elsewhere, mainly the heavily dammed Columbia River in the U.S. That's a comparison that isn't entirely fair to at least one local fish biologist. Al von Finster says this could mean the study overestimates the number of salmon killed.
In the Columbia River, there's two things about it. One is it's a long way away from here, but we have Chinook salmon in both of them. Our Chinook salmon don't necessarily behave like the fish in the Columbia do.
Still, von Finster says the study illustrates a long-standing problem that leaders need to urgently fix. To shepherd the salmon away from the turbines, the study suggests things like screens of bubbles or lights. Otherwise, installing more fish-friendly turbines, proven to increase survival rates. Yukon Energy says it's too early to say what could change. More research planned for next summer could clarify that. Julian Janak, CBC News, Whitehorse.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. You can listen to this program anytime on the CBC Listen app or on the CBC News YouTube channel. Oh, that is the moment. Leila Fernandez won Canada's first ever Billie Jean King Cup title in Seville, Spain. The 21-year-old from Laval, Quebec clinched the title after topping Italy in straight sets. Fernandez spoke after the match about the historic win.
It feels amazing, and I'm extremely proud that I was able to get to represent Canada at the biggest stage and to do it in front of Billie Jean. It means the world to me, to us, and hopefully we can keep going, celebrate tonight, and just have fun.
Earlier in the day, Marina Stakusic of Mississauga, Ontario, won her singles match. With today's win, Canada is now the title holder in both the men's and women's tennis team competitions. Canada won the men's equivalent, the Davis Cup, for the first time last year. While unfair contracts are something many musicians know all too well, now major labels are overhauling their contracts for newly signed artists, trying to block them from re-recording their own songs. It's all over the success of one woman, Taylor Swift. Steve Futterman explains.
Listen carefully. You probably know the song Shake It Off. This is the original version. And now, the new version. There are some microscopic differences, but to the average listener, it's pretty much the same. 2 years ago on the Seth Meyers Show, Taylor Swift talked about her efforts to buy the original recordings.
I made it very clear that I wanted to be able to buy my music. That opportunity was not given to me, and it was sold to somebody else. And so I just figured I was the one who made this music first. I can just make it again.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing.
What made it even worse in Swift's mind was that the man who now owned her recordings was someone she had accused of being a manipulative bully. The re-recordings have been a huge success, earning tens of millions of dollars. Mark Tavern has been in the music industry in various positions for more than 25 years.
It is unprecedented. I'm going to work to destroy the value of these masters that I created early in my career and substitute for them new masters as a way to essentially prove my point.
Now the record companies appear to be fighting back. For years, there has been standard language in contracts about when a performer can re-record.
It's the later of 5 years from delivery of the album or 2 years after the end of the term of the recording agreement.
Attorney Josh Karp represents a number of big names, including John Legend and Meghan Trainor. In new contracts, major labels are demanding some performers wait 10, 15, or even 30 years.
Because what you do as a lawyer is you look at prior agreements from the same label, and it was clearly brand new. And I thought, that's interesting. Why would I agree to something brand new with a label that I have precedent with? And so I crossed it out entirely because I was just like, who needs this? They put it back in. We talked about it.
He says it will now become a negotiating point. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift is bringing in millions in revenues each month from her re-recordings, and the record companies don't want that to ever happen again. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
Well, certain music execs aside, there are a lot of people with whom Taylor Swift definitely does not have bad blood. First up, Kelly Clarkson, who was actually the one to first suggest Swift re-record her albums in a 2019 tweet. She's just revealed to E! News that Swift finds a way of thanking her after every Taylor's version release.
She just sent me flowers. She's so nice. She was like, every time I release something, I love how kind she is, though. She's a very smart businesswoman.
Also on Swift's nice list, the Grammy Awards. Her nomination this week for Song of the Year for Anti-Hero is her 7th in the category, which beats out Paul McCartney and Lionel Richie to set a record.
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me.
And finally, her Vancouver fans. Yes, many have been left disappointed in not being able to snag concert tickets that went on sale this week. But others, like 26-year-old Mickey Harris, are ecstatic. CBC joined her for the nerve-wracking online journey.
Nervous. This is starting to kick in. It's like, oh my goodness. I'm gonna start like shaking while I'm trying to do it. Oh my God, I got 4 tickets. Row 6. Front row, like basically, holy crap, I just spent so much money. Are you dying? I'm dying a little bit. This is crazy. Let the anticipation begin. We got him.
There are also updates on Taylor Swift's new relationship with football player Travis Kelce, but I think we've run out of time. So we'll leave you with some more of Karma on The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Thanks for listening.